I was extremely fortunate to have my parents enroll me in the British International School early on in my secondary school education in year 7. Stepping through the doors of every classroom, I was enamored not only by their physical wonders, walls you can write on, the beautiful laboratory, the glamorous library, but also a new way of thinking, a new mindset, an international mindset. Surrounded by peers from diverse cultures and diving into a curriculum that spanned continents and histories, I was taught to feel global. And indeed, fragments of the world felt familiar to me. A trip to Taiwan wasn't too unfamiliar because I brushed up on some Mandarin in school. When I went to the United States or Europe for the first time, I understood a bit of the history and a bit of their customs, and most importantly, I spoke decent English. And so you can see I love my school because I wear school merch even in Paris, a huge British flag behind my back as I walk through the streets of France. Now, surrounded in this environment, there's this sense that is cultivated of belonging everywhere, that you can stitch pieces of the world into your own identity. And many in my generation doubt this or take it for granted, but the existence of the international school is crucial for us to bridge that divide, to understand those connections and those differences we have with people around the world as our fates inevitably collide with them in the future. But the international school wasn't founded on these principles. The very first international schools founded in the early 20th century in Europe were designed for children of expats, of diplomats, of missionaries who wanted their children to have a consistent education, to bring that of their home country abroad so that they can reintegrate themselves after traveling to a lot of countries. But as these expatriate schools expanded, there was a realization that the student body was too broad, from too many cultures to too many countries for us to just teach the lessons of a particular country. The focus then shifted to just teaching a British culture or an American culture to something that can encompass and represent that student body, that allows everyone to develop. And so I believe the foundations for the international school that we know today was founded on these principles. Now, during this process of development, a lot of these institutions allowed local students to attend, and this marked a very important development because then everybody had the opportunity to learn in this global environment, even in their own homeland. I am one of those local students who attended international school, and I can tell you that we indeed are immersed in this multicultural curriculum. But a lot of it is based on Western tradition. I get my instructions in English, and we are immersed in what can be broadly defined as the culture of the Anglosphere. And a lot of things I do at home reflect this. I speak to my brother in English because it's convenient for us to do so, because we speak that language at school, so why not do it at home? In school, we learn of beautiful Western literature, things like Macbeth or To Kill a Mockingbird. And in all of these novels, or in most of these novels, the characters are physically and geographically grounded in their home countries. Macbeth in the verdant hills and fortresses of Scotland, and Jem and Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird in the deep south of the United States. In this international framework, the national is made very clear. If not by our teachers, then by our physical reality, that we are learning of the other culture, their culture. It is not our culture. We don't have Scottish shows. We don't have the American fields in Vietnam. And therefore, that begs the questions, and it is occasionally asked to us, if they are like that, if they over there have this, have that, then what do you have? What is your culture like, and where do you belong? Now, for someone like me, this should be a simple answer. I hold a Vietnamese passport, and I live here for my entire life, so I'm Vietnamese, and I belong to the Vietnamese culture. What's so hard about that? But how confidently can I say this? Because like many of my local peers, despite living here my entire life, there's this quiet dissonance that we never want to admit, that we don't feel that we sort of belong to our home country. And nowhere is this clearer than in our use of language. 2 years ago, I was talking to one of my friends who had very strong opinions on this very topic. He told me that if you can't speak your mother tongue, you don't deserve to be Vietnamese, because that's the first thing you do, right? You have to speak the language in order to converse with people and know the culture. And he wanted to emphasize this argument. And he told me the whole thing again in Vietnamese. And when he got to mother tongue, he said, Lưỡi mẹ. Now, lưỡi mẹ does mean mother tongue in Vietnamese in the sense that it's literally your mom's tongue. But it does not imply the first language. Now, I hope he was talking about the first language, it's not your mom's tongue. But in any case, the correct way to say it in Vietnamese is tiếng mẹ đẻ, or the language of the mother that gave birth to you. Now, for the friend who grew up in this environment teaching English, it seems strange to them that we have to say tiếng mẹ đẻ, not lưỡi mẹ. Because doesn't lưỡi mean the same thing? But the problem with tongue in Vietnamese is that it doesn't have the same linguistic implications that it does in English. And we don't realize this because we have such little exposure, such minimal exposure to our culture. Now, this is a bit more extreme, but basic language conventions are also missing from some of our conversations. We use "ya" in Vietnamese to denote respect to elders or people in positions of authority. We put this in basically before all of our sentences. And yet, again, for somebody who grew up in an environment speaking English, it feels a bit weird and redundant because, yeah, it just translates roughly to okay or yes. And in some scenarios, when you say things like, yeah, come, or yes, no, okay, no, it doesn't really make sense. And it feels, why do I have to do this? But to not do this in Vietnamese would be to be rude. And therefore, we sort of grudgingly accept our culture. And as one of my friends painfully, but I suppose accurately puts it, we kind of do embrace our culture. After all, we cursed in Vietnamese, but every other thing comes out in English. And it is this mindset that makes us different. And it's so easy to spot an international kid outside because of the occasional English word they fit into their sentences, or their inability to form concise sentences, always dragging their sentences out to talk about an idea that can be summarized in one word. And so we're stuck in this borderline, a land where I'm more prone to imagine the countryside as a large field of wheat with a lone windmill instead of a field of rice, with buffaloes treading behind the farmers, despite living in the reality of the latter. And this reflects something that researchers call a third culture. Now, people in this third culture kids, are usually those who live outside of their parents' culture, of their home culture, and move to different countries. This is very similar to the original demographic that was aimed for international schools, children of expats, of diplomats, of missionaries. And so what they form is this unique third culture that isn't really their first culture, isn't their home culture, but it's not really the host culture. It's something in between. And it's not even necessarily an intersection. It's this no man's land in between that nobody really knows where it belongs to. And now, I feel a lot of sympathy for third culture kids, but we are not third culture kids because I live in Vietnam, and my home country and my host country are the same thing. I'm from Vietnam. The only difference is that we are exposed to this education, so influenced by Western pedagogy, by Western culture, by Western language, that we feel that we don't belong here, as if we live in the West, but we don't live in the West because, as I said, we have no Scottish shows, we have no American countryside in Vietnam. And so it feels like we're always caught in the middle. We're always perpetually over there in that no man's land where nobody seems to understand us and we don't seem to understand anybody. But there's also another way to see this. Because in our ever-changing world, the archaic values of a static us and them, of my culture and your culture, the fact that I'm Vietnamese and you're not, and therefore we're different, shouldn't be protected so dearly. Because if we want to coexist, there is that need to build bridges. And we can't build bridges if there are walls obstructing us. And therefore, many argue that this unique position of local kids in international schools, our ability to both understand part of our heritage and also part of the global culture, allows us to bridge this gap, to understand the nuances that would otherwise be ignored. And so a lot of my friends say this, and they're like, well, then why do I have to learn Vietnamese, right? I can just be this cosmopolitan. I can adopt this identity where I can call every place my home. But that is the problem, because having a home and calling a lot of places your home is different from having no home and going everywhere, because you can never really find a place where you can fit in. Going across the world to try to find a place where you feel at home, where you feel safe, is different from going to like a few places and calling them your home. Because the problem with globalization is that it allows us to involve ourselves in this chaotic but interesting environment, but it also threatens to dissolve us in this environment, to make us rootless, to make us think that we don't belong anywhere, and we constantly search for this. Because if we use the age-old example of human development as a tree, right? We can have as many ornate and as many extensive branches as we want to. We can have knowledge of so many cultures. But at the end of the day, we need strong roots. We need that taproot that keeps us together when strong winds or great storms come. And I believe naturally for us, one of these taproots are our first culture, because anywhere we go in the world, we always need to find a way to understand the people around us. We always need a way to fit in some sort of way. Now, and to find this home. Now, my younger self in my pre-BIS days was very adamant about his Vietnamese identity. If you asked him back then, of course I'm Vietnamese. What the hell are you asking, right? But then my older self, oh, okay. Anyways, as you can see in my beautiful image editing skills, I'm much taller now and much more attractive. But apart from that, I also have this new international identity with me, right? I feel like I can understand the world. But it also feels like I'm starting to discard that old self. It feels like I'm starting to feel less Vietnamese. And sometimes I encourage myself to do that, but it ought not to be that way. Because at the end of the day, no matter where I travel in the world, there's always some place I must call home. Now, it doesn't have to be Vietnam, and for many local students, they tell me that, oh, why would I have to call Vietnam my home when I'm learning in the Western culture, right? But if you go to the West, if you go to the United States, go to the United Kingdom, you always have to fit in anyways. You have to understand them in order to be part of them. And so if you're living in this culture and you're trying to find those many homes globally, then why not start with your country, the very first place that would accept you because simply you look and feel like them. And so no matter where I travel in the world, and no matter how many homes I find, when I am asked where I'm from, I would proudly say, and I hope all my peers here would say in unison, that we are from Vietnam. Thank you.